Check, check.
Good evening. I'd like to call to order the Springford Area School District Board meeting on September 26th. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The Springford Board of School Directors believes the community has the right to bring before the board issues and concerns they may have about items on the agenda or about items in general which affect the district or their children. Because of this belief and philosophy, the board will schedule a time at the beginning and conclusion of every meeting to have an opportunity for community members to share their concerns with the board. At the start of the meeting, members from the public may comment on agenda items only. The school board will move through the meeting agenda, then at the end, when prompted, there will be a time for public comment. This meeting is being filmed to be broadcast on community cable channels and online. Individuals intending to make public comments should be aware that they are being filmed. Speakers will be asked to state their name and the area in which you reside before your comment.
Good evening, and thank you for attending our voting meeting tonight. Ms. Crew, who is filling in for Mrs. Bickert, could we please have a roll call?
Certainly. In person this evening, we have Mr. Schaefer, Mr. Jackson, Mrs. Weingarten, Mrs. Zazowski, Mrs. Hermans, Dr. Wright, Mrs. Deerdorf, and Dr. Motzer.
Okay. Thank you very much. Dr. Murray, nice to have you next to me. Any announcements?
There are no announcements.
Okay, and I had just one, that the board did meet in executive session prior to our 7:30 start to discuss legal matters. With that said, we'll move on to section 1 of our agenda, public to be heard on agenda items only. If there is anyone that wishes to speak, please approach the podium with your name, township of residence, as well as the agenda item for which you are speaking. Okay. Section 2, board and committee reports. We'll go to Mrs. Zazowski for the Career and Technology Center.
So we did the JOC at the Western Center. We did have a meeting on Monday, September 11th. The meeting was on Zoom earlier than usual because there were also our committee meetings here later that night. So in that meeting, Mr. Livingood, our director over there, talked to us about the meeting with the superintendents and the business managers in August. At that time, ideas around the capital improvement funding was discussed, and there will be updates on that going forward. It is something that the Western Center is looking to get into place. There was also conversation about having ICS come back and take a second look at the plan before the facility, before we move forward with any more improvements to the facilities. A third piece that was addressed is that the food service now at the Western Center is being provided by Springford and through the work of Mr. Fink, actually with Aramark. That is off to a good start. Very few complaints over there about that, and in general, they're very, very happy. So I hope that Mr. Fink will tell us regularly that they're happy on our end here at Springford as well. He's not saying anything right now, maybe another time. Oh, he gave me a nod. Okay, we'll take that nod. Also, there were a number of safety audits this summer, and the Western Center looks like it's in good shape there. Mr. Craig Robinson is the new principal. He is excited to come on board on October 17th when his 60 days are up in Philadelphia. He's coming from Philadelphia, but he is joining us when it is possible over there at the Western Center. And then we did get an update on enrollment numbers for this year. So far, well, I guess as we are into this year now, a total of 707 students are enrolled, 394 in the AM and 314 in the PM. 175 from Pottsgrove, 314 from Upper Perk, and 218 from Springford. So as we go into the time later this year where we are considering going into the trade, I think it's important that Springford does highlight that that is an option for students and what a good job they do over there. So our next meeting will be, I believe it's October 7th. We're going to have October 2nd. Yes, October 2nd, in person, 7 o'clock at the Western Center. We will have a regular meeting that evening. Are there any questions on that brief Zoom that we did have in September?
That feasibility study that's being performed by ICS, that's on their separate contract or separate PO, then directly with the district? With the district.
I believe so. Mr. Hunter, can you add anything to that?
Can you repeat the question, please? I'm sorry.
Mr. Hunter, the feasibility study that's being performed by ICS over at the Tech Center, that's on their separate purchase order or contract? That's not tied directly back to the district, correct?
No, it is through Western Center.
All right, thank you.
On the recommendation, though, of Mr. Hunter and Springford is how that came about.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Ms. Grew?
Yeah, I just wanted to let you know that Mrs. Earl joined on Zoom at 7:34.
Okay. Thank you very much. And I will say, Mrs. Zazowski, your plug for the open house and just making sure that our 8th grade students and their families are aware that, this is something that they can explore, generally happens in December. And as a mother of an 8th grader, I'm looking forward to it.
Wonderful.
Thank you. Moving on to the Legislative Committee, Mrs. Deardorff.
We have not met yet this year. Our first meeting is going to be on October 4th. The quick update that I have is that the 2004-2005 Base Act 1 index was released from PDE at 5.3%. That's all that I have.
Thank you, Mrs. Deardorff. Any questions? Okay, and then we'll move right on to your role as PSBA liaison.
The only update that I have regarding PSBA is that I think you all may have received an email from Ms. McGranahan, that our Select Strings Ensemble was selected to perform at the PASBA PSBA Leadership Conference at Kalahari. So their performance is going to be on October 17th, 11 to 1, if anybody. I believe Dr. G will be there. thinks he's attending, but I believe, as far as he knows, and so I may be going up as well to see them perform, which is exciting. So that's all that I have.
Okay, thank you very much. Any questions? All right, Dr. Murray, standing in for Mr. Rizzo, Superintendent's report.
There is no report tonight.
Thank you very much. And Solicitor's report.
No report this evening.
Fabulous. So we're going to move on to the voting portion of our meeting. This is items for which we discussed last week. However, there are some new items that have been added since our working meeting. So we'll first go with Section 3 minutes.
Any reason why they were not highlighted like the updates?
They are online, just not, I mean, I think it's printed, well, actually, no, they're not, because it is not printed black and white.
I believe additions aren't highlighted, but they are called out as a different line item as being a new addition.
Thank you, Ms. Crew.
Okay, Section 3, letters A and B. Do I have a motion? Is there a second? Second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes 9-0. Moving on to personnel, Section 4, letters A through I. Is there a desire to separate anything?
Separate I.
Okay, separating I. Anything else? Okay, so we are first going to be voting on Section 4, letters A through H. Do I have a motion? Second? Questions and/or discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Okay, that motion passes 9-0. Next, we'll look at personnel, Section 4, letter I. Do I have a motion?
Second.
Questions and discussion? I am going to evaluate this based on the effective date being no later than 27th, that this is another out-of-house hire. And this is something I've talked about, I think, last 6 years. For whatever reason, our replacements continue to be out of house. And it's something that concerns me, and I will continue to voice my opposition to this for the next 2 years. Thank you.
I'd like to comment on that as well. I would like to welcome Ms. Cooper to the district. I'm glad I got to meet you tonight, and I would like to commend our administration on selecting the best talent for our district.
We have
So,
not voted.
Ms. Deardorff, if we could vote first prior to doing that.
I'm happy to meet you, and I'm glad you're here at our meeting.
Happy to meet you.
And so glad that
Mrs. Zazowski, you'd like to make a comment?
I just want to say that, yes, Mr. Jackson, you have brought this up before about out-of-house hires, and I do believe that Mr. Rizzo has repeatedly responded to that with the statistics of hiring practices, and when someone is hired from in-house or someone is hired from outside of the house, that they're really looking for the best candidate for the position, which I think that he has made every effort, and he's not here to defend himself right now, but he has made every effort to align that or point that out and say that there's reasoning there. So whether it's good, bad, or in between, as I'm sure you're going to continue to address it, I believe when Rizzo returns, he'll continue to do that as well.
You're correct, and I was going to let this go. However, yes, a spreadsheet has been provided. However, I want to deal with the facts, not the spreadsheet. So if I look at the upper tier of the cabinet, the last 3 superintendents have been out of house. Mr. Rizzo, Dr. Murray, Dr. G. all out of house. When we say we get the best candidate, it's still a criticism of the district, because if we're not having people that want to pursue a vertical rise, that's on the district. That means we're not doing our job internally. So no matter how you want to slice this, and this is not you, but the issue is we're not doing our job internally. If we're not getting qualified candidates internally, we're not doing our job pushing them vertically.
So I'm going to, I'm sorry.
So the question
Continue.
is, when there is not an internal hire, what do we do? Do we go back and evaluate the process? Do we evaluate the roadmaps that we've created for our employees? If there's an internal candidate, do we talk to that internal candidate and share some insight to why they were not selected? This is just an ongoing issue. And the top tier of the cabinet is all out of house. That's not a spreadsheet, it's just a fact.
I mean, fair enough, those are facts. I think also, though, first I want to back up a little bit and say maybe the other external and internal candidates, not that they were not qualified, maybe they were all qualified for the position. For whatever reason, administration is coming forward and saying that this is the best qualified, the most qualified candidate here. Does that mean that we should not look at the practices and the roadmap as you just laid out? No. I think it's always good practice to go back and reflect on what it is that has worked, what hasn't worked, what improvements we can make. And I think Springford does that consistently in a number of different areas, not just in something like this. Should that continue to happen? Absolutely.
So I will just make one final comment, which is I think both can be true. I think you can say in a specific instance, the best candidate for the position was hired, and you can say, I also have a desire to see pipelines be grown internally in the district to be able to allow people to aspire to those positions and to get the training that they need to aspire to those positions. And I do agree with Mrs. Zazowski that I do believe that the district does do that. I think actually both are true. But with that said, can we?
Yeah, I was going to commend you on that excellent statement because I 100% agree. And then I was also going to see if there was board support to move for a vote and end discussion.
So all those in.
The issue here, let's separate the two.
So I guess I brought up a point. Do we have support to end discussion?
Discussion
and make
is
a vote?
still going on.
So I'm making a.
Mr.
Yes,
Fitzgerald, thank you.
If there's a desire to call the question under Robert's rules, we'd have to see if there's majority support to end discussion on the topic. So there would have to be a vote on whether to end debate.
So do we need to have a second for that since Mrs. Deardorff
Yes.
brought that up? So is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Earl, who I believe seconded that. All those in favor in ending the discussion on personnel letter 4I, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
No.
No.
Okay, so that motion passes 6-3. So now we will move forward with the vote. The vote being on letter 4I. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
So that motion passes 8-1. Moving on to, oh, yes, Dr. Murray, go for it.
Good evening. I would just like to take a moment to introduce Chastity Cooper, who is joining us this evening. Welcome to Springford. We're excited to have you on board. We look forward to having you.
Thank you very much. I second that. Moving on to section 5, finance, letters A through O.
Separate D10.
D10. Okay, so we are separating D10. Any others to be separated? Okay, so we're voting on letters A through O minus D10 in Section 5 Finance. Do I have a motion? Is there a second?
Second.
Questions and discussion?
I do have a question on O, the new finance piece. Is that amount any different? I probably should have separated this also, but is that amount any different than the previous agreement?
It is not. It's the same cost as last year.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions and discussion?
Under N, this is an open-ended cost. We're saying $66 an hour and a max of 5 weeks. Are we looking at 8 weeks, 10 weeks, 20 weeks, 60 weeks? So what are we approving there? $336?
The maximum that we put down was not to exceed $10,000. And this is for students who cannot access homebound instruction. They have to access it virtually, and we've exceeded all of the in-house tutoring available through our own staff.
So where's the reference to $10,000?
Do we need to amend the,
Okay, can we make an
You can
amendment?
amend it, yeah.
To include that? I'm, proposing that.
Okay, so we have a motion to amend Section 5, letter N, to include the words "not to exceed $10,000." Is there a second? Okay. We need to, do we need to take public comment on that since we're making the amendment?
Yeah, let public comment, then we'll vote on the amendment.
Okay, so if there's anyone that wishes to speak on Section 5, letter N, and specific to the amendment, could you please approach the podium with your name and township of residence? Okay. Okay. So I don't see anyone approaching the podium to make public comment. So all those in favor of the administration recommending approval for an agreement with EIUS LLC, DBA, Learn Well Services to provide virtual teaching services for a student in need of homebound instruction and/or alternative instruction. Services will be provided at a rate of $66 per hour at a maximum of 5 hours per week, not to exceed $10,000.
Excuse me, we're not voting on all of it, just the amended part.
Amendment, correct.
Just the, it's not to exceed $10,000.
Correct. Not to, I was reading the whole thing with including that last piece, which is not to exceed $10,000. So all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Ms. Earl, any opposed?
No, aye.
Okay, so that motion passes 9-0. So now we can go back to voting on finance, letters A through O minus D10 with the newly amended letter N. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? That motion passes 9-0. Going back to finance, section 5, D10. Do I have a motion? A second? Second. Questions and discussion?
So this Pottstown Health and Safety Grant, is that the same grant that we were talking about, Dr. Murray, for, I think it, there was another program earlier this year, and we were talking, we didn't know if that was going to come through. So we planned on using money from another place to...
I think you're referring to the Pottstown Health and Wellness Grant. In looking at this, I believe this should read Pottstown Health and Wellness Grant, not safety.
Okay. But didn't we say that we were going to use that money for that other piece?
Correct, but we had it last year as well, so we have a new grant this year as well. So we did, this is a recurring grant that we have gotten.
So there's enough to cover
There
it?
is enough to
Okay.
cover this.
Okay.
We are planning to cover 5,000. We wrote the motion so that it would include the Pottstown Health and Wellness Grant and special education, 5,000 of which is planned to come out of the Pottstown Health and Wellness Grant, and the remainder, 300, would come out of the special education budget.
Okay. Now, do we need to amend that to have the correct title for that, Mr. Fitzgerald?
Wellness versus safety.
Considering it.
No.
No.
I'm okay with this
Okay.
safety.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions and discussion? All those in favor of finance letter D10, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes 9-0. Moving on to property, letter A. Do I have a motion? Second?
Second.
Questions and discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, that motion passes 9-0. Moving on to Section 7, Programming and Curriculum, letters A and B. Do I have a motion? A second? Second. Questions and discussion?
At the prior meeting, there was going to be follow-up to the 21.5 that's being charged now versus the existing. This is an add-on to Skyward, but I think in the previous board memo, there was a reference to a savings. So how does that relate to this cost that's being asked for?
You're correct. There's an initial investment of $21,500 with a reoccurring cost of $4,500. This will replace the registration gateway, which currently costs $17,000, so we will have a savings of $12,500.
And this is a yearly cost, or this is an all-in cost?
The $21,500 is the all-in first-year cost. The reoccurring cost is $4,500.
Are we locked into a contract, or is that just an add-on as we go forward?
Let me double check my notes really quick. The notes from Mr. Catalano is that the recurring cost is $4,500 for each year. I can't say for certain whether or not that's locked in, and how many years it's locked in for.
So by approving this, we don't know if we...
If I could interrupt, this is Jim in the back.
Okay.
It's a pay-as-you-go, year-to-year agreement with them. Typically, there's a small percentage increase, but it's not, and it's encompassed with the entire Skyward agreement, which of course also is a year-to-year subscription.
So it's annual?
Correct.
Okay. That's all we had to say. Thank you.
And we're going to sunset or get rid of that other program that we have then? Because I thought there was some discussion about that was staying also, or a part of that was staying.
Registration gateway is set to no longer be used.
Okay, is there any other questions or discussion on programming and curriculum, letters A and B? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes 9-0. Moving on to conferences and workshops, letters A through C. Do I have a motion? Is there a second? Second. Okay. Questions and discussion?
I ask this question quite often, and I'll ask it again. We send folk to conferences. Do we house that information so we can share it with other administrators or staff members, or are we just sending a person after a person to the same conference?
So as part of our conference approval, anybody attending conferences are required to submit a report at the end of their conference attendance, and one of the questions on there is how will this information be shared with colleagues? So there is a plan, for example, looking at the math professional development that's on here. They're selected for a very specific purpose so that it's part of the math review cycle and making sure that those grade level representation can come back to their grade and share that information. So yes, it is part of the process.
But is this information housed anywhere? A repository, of information that someone who can't attend a conference, the same conference, would they have access to that information?
Not that I'm aware of one central location.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions and discussion? All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Mrs. Earl, just to be clear, what is your vote?
Aye.
Thank you. That motion passes 9-0. Moving on to Section 9, Other Business, letters A and B. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Okay. Questions and discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes 9-0. Section 10 is simply informational, and then we will move on to board comment.
I have
I'll
a
let
comment.
someone else go first. 'cause
Okay, all right, I'll jump in then, Clinton. I just noticed, and maybe it's because it's the beginning of the year, but I haven't seen any presentations on. Are there, not that I want to sit here for hours and hours, I don't, but are there, what's the forecast for that? Like,
We do have a schedule of presentations. Erin, do you want to speak specifically about what's coming up?
Sure, we'll have 3 student groups coming in October. Our National Merit semifinalist recipients are National Merit commended students. There were 9 semifinalists and 21 or 13 commended. There were a lot of numbers going around in a short period of time, so I can double check those. And then we will also be recognizing a student who received a perfect score on his AP exam, which I believe the Mercury will also be featuring him this week. So we have those coming up. Dr. Murray will be in November reporting out on some data information, Mr. Fink's budget presentation, which is always a highlight. I wish I had a noisemaker. So we do have some coming up over the next few months, but it is difficult to get everything back up and running with school starting back so swiftly.
I know that, I've been watching, the emails are still coming in, there's still a lot of things to highlight, a lot of good things happening, so just want to make sure we don't miss those.
I'm happy to hear that we're going to acknowledge Noah Ott, the gentleman who achieved that perfect score. And he lives in my neighborhood, not that means anything.
In spite of living in
One of the sky is falling discussions we had a couple of weeks ago was the technology systems administrator, where we had allocated $21,000 for 100 hours of consultant support. And we were advertising that position for $70,000 to $90,000. So I don't understand the math, but I'm curious as to know where we are with that hire. Last I heard, we had 4 qualified candidates. I love that word. Just want to get an update on where we are with that.
I can answer that. We conducted final round interviews last week. We are in the process now of checking references on the final candidate and hope to make a recommendation to the board in October.
So do we know what to-date costs we've expended for that consultant?
I am not aware of that cost.
I mentioned this at the last meeting, social media, and this has become my platform now for whatever reason. But again, to the Springford parents, if you have questions about what's going on in the district, please call the district. Stay off of Facebook. I happened to see an adjacent school Facebook posting, and there were exactly 52 posts about swatting. And none of the comments said, call the school district. They were debating what was said, how it was said, and when it was said. So for the Springford parents, if you have questions about what's going on with the district, If your bus is late, if you have an issue within the district, call the district. Don't look for answers on Facebook or Instagram or any other platform, because you will probably get bad information. That's it. Thank you.
Ms. Crew, is it putting you on the spot to perhaps show the diagram that we have as to how questions or concerns can be addressed with the district?
No, I can talk Rich through it. Rich, in the upper left corner, can you click on Springford Area School District tab? Click on our website. There you go. If you minimize that, hover over news and media. More to the right, just above the little kids watering, now above the word "to." Or just toss me the mouse. Above, hover over news and media. On the gold bar, just to the right of our schools. There we go. And then towards the bottom there, underneath social media, if you click on suggestion box. Oh, that was a close one. Okay, now we can scroll down. So we do have this graphic that's available on the website that sort of gives a guide to families who to contact first. And we always recommend, no matter what the situation, to talk to a student's teacher first and then sort of follow the process from there. We do also have a suggestion box there form, and we do check that and redirect information regularly should anybody have a suggestion come in through the suggestion box.
Thank you very much.
To you both.
And I think it's important to note as well that our school board director contact information is on the website as well, and that's the appropriate way to reach out to us in an official capacity, also not using social media, tagging us in posts, etc.
One last thing, we are 63 days from the next budget presentation. Just want to keep everybody abreast of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any additional board comment? Yes, Dr. Wright.
Thank you. I just wanted to, I was saving to this time to discuss with the hiring and the promoting from within, and I think actually the discussions that I've had with our administration with the hiring from administrator to administrator has been very thoughtful and has demonstrated that we have done that. But I did want to continue, as I have used this platform before, to encourage us as a board or a district to look to promote from teacher to administrator. I don't know that we do that very often, and I think that it's very important for our school community, for our teachers to be recognized as potential leaders in the as administrators in our district. So I once again would like to encourage that and encourage our teachers to apply for leadership positions in our district too. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Wright. We agree on something. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional board comment? Okay, then I will be the last one here. So, Mrs. Zalski, I would actually prefer you to do it because you've always been the cheerleader. Go.
I can't.
No.
I can't do it.
So just, Mrs. Zalski has always been a big proponent of getting the board together on homecoming, which is this Saturday. So we hope to see the board as well as the community out there for the parade, for the game, for the SFEA community lunch. So it will be a great time. Looking forward to that. And then lastly, what I'd like to leave us with is I did receive a thank you card from some students in the district that, ironically enough, Mrs. Zazowski, you mentioned the Pottstown Health and Wellness Grant, which historically has, a portion of those funds have been used to allow high school students to participate in the Life Skills Conference. And for those that don't know, the Life Skills Conference is an opportunity for our students over the summer to go work with instructors, really talk about interpersonal skills, social, emotional relationships, just cultivating those types of softer skills. And a lot of times these students do come back to the district Mr. Jackson says, coming back to the district to share what they've learned and with their peers, and oftentimes is the genesis for a lot of our student clubs. So for example, I think in the past, Evitum, if I'm not mistaken, there's been a couple clubs that have stemmed from students coming from the Life Skills Conference. So I did want to read this because this is a thank you note to the entire board. So Spring Forward School Board, thank you for letting us come to the Life Skills this year. We are so excited to get to know you and work with you this year. We trust our relationship will improve the lives of many students at Spring Forward attendees of Life Skills 2023. So there's, I won't name them just for privacy reasons, but there are 6 signatures here. So wanted to let the board know that the students would like to send their regards. Okay. All right, with that said, if there's no other board comment, we will move on to public to be heard. This can be on any topic, not just related to the agenda. Please approach the podium with your name and township of residence.
Good evening, John Yonchuk, Limerick Township. First, I just wanted to welcome Mrs. Cooper to the district as well. I agree with all of you. I agree with Mr. Jackson, with everyone else who made a comment. There are going to be a million different ways we evaluate both our teachers and our administrators for the positions. There's the specific qualifications that they must meet, and then there's the defining what is best in terms of how they're going to perform in the job. Many times it's just a guess when we're hiring, and that is not a comment on any of the personnel items tonight or any of the specific people. But I would like to remind those of you who are on the board now that were on the board when our current superintendent was hired. We instituted a process as a board, as a group decision, and then abruptly changed that process right in the middle of it and hired an external candidate. Although I believe he was, and correct me if I'm wrong, I believe he was assistant superintendent at the time. So I don't know if that counts as external, internal or not, but I think we just need to decide. I would urge that, if you want, we conduct a root cause analysis. What is it? Is it development and training, Mr. Jackson? Is it that, for whatever reason they don't want to come here, which would be odd because, we're a growing popular district. So I would just urge that, maybe we think about a root cause analysis for why we're having an issue there. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to approach a podium?
Rebecca Bonowitz from Limerick Township. My first time speaking, so if I'm not saying it right, I apologize. I wanted to bring attention to the school board a significant deficit in the HR job posting and hiring policy. To be honest, I do not know what the policy or process is, as I reached out to HR the first week of school and I still have not heard back. At the end of the school last year, there were multiple resignations from the Springfield girls lacrosse team, the head coach resigning on or around June 23rd. During email communication that originated in May and continued through the summer, I did bring my concerns to the area athletic director, and booster team was on that communication, regarding the position not being posted, and this was done on August 1st. I did not get a satisfactory answer from him, so I brought it to the principal as I wanted to go through the chain. He shared that the AD was guided by HR to post the position mid-September as he was still working on hiring for fall open positions. I then reached out to the HR and Mr. Rizzo the first week of school regarding the inherent problem with the delay in opening, much less filling any of these roles. In my experience, and probably in a lot of our experiences, we would never wait to open a position if there are other positions open. We should not be hiring in tandem, we should be hiring in parallel. I want to be clear that I'm not asking for anything to be taken from other teams. However, I wanted to highlight all the girls, the Spring Forward girls lacrosse team that do not have access as other male teams have. Right now, the girls do not have access to a fall league because there is no coach. The juniors that might be pursuing D1 athletics did not have a coach September 1st, which would be the first day they would have been able to be contacted. The team fundraising opportunities are halted because I was told by the area athletic director that, one, the coach might not want to do any fundraising, much less the fundraising that was eager and already had started to help out the team. At this time, the opportunity for preseason training and winter league are also in jeopardy because those things need to be done now. The position was posted finally on September 13th, 80-plus days after the original resignation. I am flabbergasted that we would wait that long to file or open any positions, much less like we're talking about, can we find internal candidates? We waited almost 3 months to open position, and no one took what I said to heart, and that was very frustrating. I kept getting the answer, we're waiting to hire other positions. I looked at other postings. We would not have waited for any other educational positions, and I'm not saying other than that I need this as a parent, and I think all of us would agree, I don't understand the inherent problem with not just posting a position when the job opens. So thank you for your time.
Ma'am, could you repeat your first and last name?
Rebecca Bonowitz, Bonawitz. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else that would like to approach the podium? Okay, do we have a motion to adjourn?
Second, third, fourth, fifth. I know.